Thank you for joining me right here on the Captain Show Drive Time Rant, baby. So this is pretty much my first live stream on this channel. I haven't done a whole lot of videos here as of late, but I'm back, folks. And want to talk a little bit today about cannabis laws and about people being arrested for cannabis, whether it's growing cannabis, using cannabis, selling cannabis, whatever the case may be. We're going to explore the idea that, hey, there's a good possibility that maybe these laws don't even really apply to you or to anyone else for that matter. And so we're going to discuss that right here, right now. Heck yeah, smoke weed every day. Absolutely, Big Ant, you bet. I'm just leaving the Health for Life dispensaries right now after a full day of serving some of the finest cannabis in the entire state of Arizona to some of the finest and most enlightened patients in the entire state of Arizona. What's up, Green Garrett 420? Hope you're doing well. So let's talk a little bit tonight about cannabis laws, and if any of you have been arrested before, did you challenge the law actually applying to you? And obviously the answer 99% of the time is no one ever really challenges the applicability of the laws. But as an anarchist, once you start to understand the idea of anarchy, not mainstream media portrayal of anarchy, but I mean real anarchy. Anarchy is not what media portrays anarchy to be. Anarchy does not mean no rules. It simply means no rulers. An anarchist society believes that all men are created equal. Therefore, there are no rulers and there are no subjects. Everyone's created equal. What you do with your time on this planet can make you more successful or less successful. However, that's a different story altogether. So, coming at this from an anarchist perspective, when you really understand the true nature of freedom and liberty and anarchy, which, like I said, just simply means no rulers. It doesn't mean no rules. It just means no rulers. And so, anything or any piece of paper that has written words on it, and they call it a law, it's just a written instrument. That's all it is. It's just a handful of politicians' opinions on paper, and then they turn around and they stare at every single American in the country and they say, you're now obligated to obey this. Now, before we had public education, Americans would have looked at the government that said, you're now obligated to obey this, and they would have said, oh, really? We're obligated to obey that, are we? Prove it with facts. And of course, there are no facts proving that the law actually applies to American citizens. Now, if you're talking about a law where a victim has been created, like murder, rape, theft, fraud, anything like that, of course, the law applies to you. It's natural law. You don't go around creating victims. However, when it comes to man-made laws, like cannabis prohibition laws, or, any kind of law, a law that requires you to get a business license before you open a business, any jaywalking laws, any type of law where there is no victim. You can go into court and, you get busted with pot, for example. You can go into court. This is what I would do. I would walk into court. I'd have a unsigned guilty plea on my very first hearing. And when the judge asks, how do you plead guilty or not guilty, I would hold up the unsigned guilty plea and I would say, sir, it's my full intention to plead guilty here today. However, I do need to see the facts proving that the law the prosecutor wants to prosecute me under actually applies to me in the first place. So what you've effectively done there is you have put the element of applicability on the table in the courtroom. during your hearing. Now, just through reason and logic, but furthermore, and even more importantly, just the court's own rules. Every element of a supposed crime must be satisfied with facts. Opinions or assumptions won't cut it. Now, 99% of the time, for example, let's say you're in Arizona and you get popped with marijuana and you don't have a medical marijuana card. And they take you to court. And so they satisfy the main two facts. Were you in the geographical location of Arizona that the law says it applies to? Yes, you were. So that fact is that element is satisfied with facts. You were, and you're not arguing that. You were in Arizona when you were popped with that weed. Now, the second element of the crime is possession of marijuana. Were you actually in possession of marijuana? Yes, of course I was. That's a fact. So those two elements, the geographical location that you were caught with the marijuana, that element is satisfied with facts. Were you actually in possession of marijuana? Yup. That element is satisfied with facts. 99% of the time, they move forward with satisfying those two elements only. That's it. The second you put the element of applicability on the table in court, what you are effectively doing is you are throwing that element on the table in court, and now the prosecutor is obligated to satisfy that element with facts. So if the judge will get mad at you too. The judge may turn around and say, "Sir, you're in my courtroom. Rest assured the laws apply to you." Well, you simply say, calm, cool, and collectively, "Thank you for sharing your opinion, sir," and turn right back to the prosecutor and hold his feet to the fire. Do you have facts that can satisfy the element of applicability, that the law that you're prosecuting me under actually applies to me? Can you provide me with the facts that proves that is true? If you can provide the facts that prove the law actually applies to you in the first place, go ahead and sign the guilty plea. Pay the fine, spend some time in jail, do whatever. But don't let him get away with not satisfying that element. And ultimately what will happen if you stay focused, and believe me, these lawyers, they don't go to law school for 7 years to learn law. No. They go to law school for 7 years to learn how to manipulate the fuck out of other human beings. And they will try to put the onus on you. For example, one trick that judges will use to try and get you off your track of holding the prosecutor to his burden of proof, his responsibility to supply facts to satisfy the element of applicability. They'll try to derail the conversation and they'll say, "Oh, so you're one of those sovereign guys that doesn't think the law applies to him." And if you turn around and say, "Yeah, your laws don't apply to me," what you've effectively done there is you've made a claim. And now the judge has manipulated the conversation from you holding the prosecutor to his burden of proof to now you have to prove your claim that the law does not apply to you. You can't prove it. There is no facts proving the law doesn't apply to you. So don't ever go in there making a claim. If the judge says to you, "Oh, you're one of those guys that doesn't think the law applies to you," here's how you respond. "Sir, I never once said the law does not apply to me. The prosecutor is making the claim that it does apply to me. I'm just asking for the facts proving that what he's saying is true. And if he can prove with facts that the law actually applies to me, I will sign this guilty plea right here, right now. We'll be done and over with. You can fine me, send me to jail, do whatever it is you want to do. But the prosecutor has to satisfy this element with facts. It's as simple as that. You've put the element of applicability on the table. The court's own rules state all elements of the crime must be satisfied with facts. Now the question is, and think about this, how many Americans and Canadians are sitting in prison right now for growing marijuana, for being in possession of marijuana, for transporting marijuana, for selling marijuana, yet never creating a victim. How many people are sitting in prison because they got caught, they assume the law applies to them, and so they just try to grovel for a lesser sentence, or maybe to have it thrown out since it was your first offense? Fuck that shit. Go in there and make them prove that law fucking applies to you. They're making the claim the law applies to you by actually charging you with violating their law. Now, when you go to court, hold their feet to the fire. Make them prove with facts the law applies to you. There are no facts the law applies to you. It's literally just a criminal gang that's written up these written instruments, and they turn around and say, this law now applies to everyone. Everyone's now obligated to obey this. Really, motherfuckers? Prove it. Prove it with facts that we are now obligated to obey that law. And you can do the same shit with any kind of victimless crime, like jaywalking, speeding, parking tickets, anything where the government is literally trying to attack you. And let's face it, that's what it is. It's government trying to attack you. We are not a society where all men are created equal. We are a society where a handful of men and women are now rulers, and the rest of us are subjects. Okay? When you don't want to fight this on the street, because let me tell you something with the cops. Cops are literally, no joke, 5-year-olds with temper tantrums, adrenaline-seeking qualities, power-hungry, control-freak qualities, and they are completely unaccountable. They will beat you up and look for any excuse to beat you up, or even fill you full of lead if they have to, if you try to challenge them on the side of the street. So if they pull you over and they get you with cannabis, stay peaceful, stay quiet, don't answer any questions, let them put you in handcuffs, let them take you down to jail. Just fucking do it. Don't open your mouth. Don't say anything to the cops. Be as peaceful as possible. Be as peaceful as possible. The idea when you get pulled over by the police is to make sure you stay alive and stay in one piece. So don't fucking argue with the 5-year-olds with guns and badges and a temper tantrum. Because believe me, they will look for any excuse to take the butt of the gun and wrap it off your forehead. So the idea there is just say, I'm not answering any questions. Let them put you in handcuffs or write you into whatever they're going to do. If they take you to jail, don't answer any questions. Wait for your time in court. As soon as the judge says, how do you plead guilty or not guilty, hold up that unsigned guilty plea and say, I'm willing to sign this guilty plea right now. I was absolutely in possession of pot. I was absolutely in the geographical location of Arizona. But one fact I don't have here is a fact proving the element of applicability, and I'm putting that on the table right now. And so, you can do that. And there's not a lot of Americans that know you can do that. It's generally anarchists. A few libertarians are starting to get the idea that, hey, wait a minute, if all men are created equal, how did some men write words on an English piece of paper and then obligate everyone else to obey it? Or face jail time, or have money stolen from you. Because they don't confiscate your pot. They don't confiscate your money. They steal your pot. They steal your money. And stealing's a crime. Just because they're wearing badges and guns and they have politicians behind them that write English words on a piece of paper doesn't change the fact that it's a crime. Unless they can show you facts that make their enforcement of these so-called laws a factual thing, then what they're doing is committing a crime against you. And it's up to you to hold their feet to the fire. They're the ones making the claim. Government, the prosecutor, the police officers, they're making the claim that the law they're prosecuting you under actually applies to you. Make them prove it. Make them prove it with facts. If the judge says, rest assured our law applies to you, that's why you're standing in our courtroom. Sir, first of all, I'm standing in this courtroom under duress. I don't want to be here. But you have men with badges and guns that'll come and hunt me down if I didn't show up here. So let's get that straight. I'm here under duress. Number two, I just put the element of applicability on the table. Now, has Mr. Prosecutor got any facts proving the element of applicability? And the judge will turn around, he'll say, whatever. Oh, rest assured our laws apply to you. Well, that's his opinion. You got to remember, everything that comes out of their mouth is generally a lie. That's his opinion. That's not a fact. Just because he says it doesn't satisfy the element of applicability. That's just the judge's opinion. So you can say to the judge, thank you for sharing that opinion with us, sir, and turn right back to the prosecutor and hold his feet to the fire. Sir, do you have facts proving the law that you want to prosecute me under actually applies to me in the first place? If you can satisfy this element of applicability, I'll sign this guilty plea right here, right now. But it's up to free Americans, and you can do it without a lawyer. In fact, I would recommend not getting a lawyer. Lawyers are part of the bar system. They're going to try and talk you out of challenging jurisdiction like that, because they're part of the system. Judges will tell you they have to work with these judges every day. They don't want to get on the judge's bad side, and it's understandable. They have huge student loans to pay off. Some of these friggin' lawyers are in debt $200,000 for student loans. They won't be out of debt till they're like 55, 60 years old. Same thing with doctors. It's crazy. And so they don't want to piss the judge off. But I'm going to start writing a whole book on challenging the government's laws, all kinds of laws. And I'm hopefully going to get together with Mark Stevens. I've reached out to him a couple of times, and he's more than willing to do the interview. I just got to find time where we can actually sit down and get together for a couple hours where I can interview Mark Stevens. Mark Stevens is an incredible anarchist, author, and radio show host. Adventures in Legal Land is one of his books. He's a student of Lysander Spooner, who's one of my heroes. If you don't know who Lysander Spooner is, I definitely recommend looking up Lysander Spooner. He was an American anarchist lawyer from the 1800s. He is the guy that challenged the U.S. Postal Office and brought home delivery to the U.S. Postal Office before the U.S. Postal Office outlawed his business, which was delivery of mail. But, yeah, I got a little beard going on here, my friend. Got a little beard going on. You bet. I'm going to start doing a lot more live streams here. Yeah, hey, John, Canada is the same thing. Canada, UK, Australia, you can challenge those motherfuckers. And when I say challenge them, they're making a claim that their stupid laws apply to you. Go into court and make them prove it. If they... judges will get mad, man. They don't like their authority challenged in that way. They don't like it. But when you put the element of applicability on the table, it's a pretty hard situation for any judge or any prosecutor to ignore without getting really close to that line of prosecutorial misconduct, which is a felony. So one issue being prosecutorial misconduct would be continuing on to a trial and just completely ignoring the element of applicability and trying to prosecute you without ever first satisfying the element of applicability. That's prosecutorial misconduct. If you put the element of applicability on the table and they go ahead, put you through the hearing, through the trial, completely ignoring your request to satisfy the element of applicability, a higher court will look at that and say that is prosecutorial misconduct, because the higher court's job at that point in time is to judge how the lower court judged the case. And so if the higher court sees, the first thing they're going to look at, were the elements of the crime satisfied with facts? And they'll see that, well, the standard elements were satisfied with facts, but wait a minute, why in this case was the element of applicability put on the table, and why is there nothing proving that fact? And, hey, you may not be able to go after the judge. You may be able to go after the state's insurance and go after them, but you sure as hell can go after the prosecutor. And the judges, they're cloaked in immunity. You can go after the state's insurance at that time and claim damages if they just railroad you through their court system without ever satisfying the element of applicability. And eventually, the insurance companies are going to raise the rates on the state because of this judge, having insurance claims put against his rulings. Then now the state has to pay higher insurance rates. So you'll get politicians that will go up to that judge and say, eventually, hey, motherfucker, listen, because of your rulings, our insurance rates are getting higher and higher. This has got to stop. And, you may not want to be ruling like that anymore. And so they can put pressure on the judges to be a lot more fair in their hearings. Now, when it comes to prosecutors, you can absolutely go after the prosecutor with criminal charges and civil charges if they just try to railroad you through the system while failing to satisfy the element of applicability that you intentionally put on the table in court. So, hey, prosecutors, you can definitely nail for prosecutorial misconduct. So, hey, don't think that there isn't avenues if you do get railroaded through the system. And you can call into question the element of applicability at any time. You can do it the very first hearing. You can do it halfway through trial. You can do it after you've been convicted and you're sitting in prison. You can call in the element of applicability. You can call in the element of applicability or jurisdiction in this case at any time, but it's up to you to do it. And there's no sense hiring a lawyer. The lawyer's part of the bar, and he's going to try to dissuade you from, challenging, because you're not just really challenging the cannabis laws or the jaywalking laws. You're challenging an entire system. And you're holding the prosecutor's feet to the fire, yes, based on the one issue that he may be prosecuting you under, but you are really, in effect, challenging the entire way government operates. It's sad. It's incredibly sad to watch. I'm sorry, guys. I'd love to sit here and read your comments here, but I am driving, so it's a little difficult for me to do that while I'm driving. But I'll watch them after the video and respond to how many ever I can. But yeah, folks, if you're in trouble with the law, I'm getting ready to sit down and start putting a book together and a newsletter as well. I want to help people be able to defend themselves against government attacks. Now, when the state gives you a speeding ticket, a parking ticket, or they arrest you for cannabis possession, or whatever the case may be, doesn't really matter as long as there's no victim. Anytime the state is putting you in handcuffs or trying to extract money from you or impounding your car or whatever the case may be, I consider that an attack by the state. And so I want to help people. I want to give people the tools to help them be able to defend themselves effectively. And, I've spent a lot of years learning about these different tactics, I guess you could say. And it's basically all... I've heard about all the, you got to claim that you're a sovereign and that the UCC, whatever the number is, all these codes and rules, you got to claim this and that. You got to claim your name. I thought that's another big famous one. You have to claim your name. It's not all in capital letters. It's all bullshit. Bullshit. Don't fall for any of that. There's absolutely no facts proving any of that's true at all. Okay? What is true is that government is applying laws to people without ever proving with facts the laws actually apply to people. That's the problem. And so I want to teach people how to use that simple fact that government is trying to apply a law to you that they've never proven with facts and never had to prove with facts actually applies to you. And so we're definitely going to do that. I'm definitely going to get together at some point in time with Mark Stevens. I learn a lot from him. He's been just a wealth of information. He's a great author, a great talk show host. And he's a student of Lysander Spooner, who's the exact philosopher that I'm a student of as well. And Mark Stevens is a guy that once I do the interview with Mark Stevens, I'm going to post it right here on my YouTube channel. Be sure to check it out. Be sure to check it out because that's going to be a hell of an interview. He's had a lot of success in court. Great video of him at the city council meeting in Scottsdale, literally putting all of the city council members in the hot seat, basically, and they were dead silent. They couldn't answer his questions, and it was pretty impressive thing to watch. When you start to ask very relevant questions about the applicability of these laws that these statist politicians just assume applies to you, and you start asking them relevant questions, you really start to understand that the term "the emperor wears no clothes" is quite factual. And when you start to see these politicians that you look at to as authority, or these judges or these prosecutors, you look at them as, oh man, they're scary people, you know what I mean? But when you start to ask them relevant questions, they get naked pretty quick. And you start to realize that, holy fuck, I've been going through my whole life assuming these laws apply. But when you ask these folks to present facts that can be placed into evidence that would prove these laws apply, they can't do it. And they scramble. And it's the scrambling that they do that you really start to understand. You really start to not fear these people so much. And you really start to go, these people are criminals. That's all they are. These aren't politicians. These are criminals. These aren't police officers. These are criminals. And I mean, even if they push it through to a trial, let's say you get popped with cannabis and the judge just completely ignores your request for the facts proving the element of applicability and just railroads you through the system and throws in a not guilty plea. He basically practices law from the bench, which is another no-no, and says, I'm just going to enter in a not guilty plea and we're going to set this date for trial. And you can go on there. Are you practicing law from the bench now, Your Honor? I would never call him Your Honor, by the way. Call him Sir. Just leave it at that. If he doesn't like it, fuck him. Fungu to him. Yeah, hold his feet to the fire. Sir, are you practicing law from the bench now? It's not that I'm not willing to enter in a guilty plea. I'm willing to enter in a plea today. I just need to see the fact proving the element of applicability, and boom, bang, bang, and we're out. And there's sometimes the judges may go, that's it, I'm done, I'm not hearing anymore. Not guilty plea, trial date set for this, blah, 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 whatever. And he sets a trial date. Well, now imagine this. And just picture this in your head. You now can cross-examine the witnesses. And of course, the police officer that busted you with pot is absolutely a witness. So, think about this. When you put the police officer on the stand, and like I said, you don't need a lawyer for this. You just need to be truthful, you need to be factual, and you need to ask the relevant question. And that's proving that you got to understand it. You own yourself. If they're going to say these laws apply, you want to see facts. And you got to keep that in your mind, because these lawyers and the judges and the prosecutors, they will try to they'll try to take you off track of what you're trying to. They'll know pretty quick what you're trying to go for, and they will try to dissuade you from doing so. You got to stay focused. Now imagine putting the police officer on the stand and asking the police officer, "You pulled me over. You caught me with pot. Is that correct? Yes or no?" "Yes, it is." Now you were, when you gave me the ticket or placed me in handcuffs, you were enforcing a law that the state has on the record. Is that correct? The officer's going to say, "Yes, I was enforcing whatever code law, blah, blah, blah." And you say, "Okay." And then you ask him the question, "Do you, Mr. Officer, have first-hand knowledge of any facts that could be placed into evidence that the law you assume applies to me actually applies to me? Who told you it applies to me?" What do you think that officer's going to say? You think he has first-hand facts proving the law applies? Hell no, he doesn't have first-hand knowledge of any facts proving the law applies. He thinks it applies. He assumes it applies. Why? Because we've all been taught that the laws apply. But when you hold their feet to the fire and you put the element of applicability on the table, they cannot produce facts proving the law applies. There may be some people that'll say the law applies because they put people in prison. That's what makes the law apply. Well, isn't prison the result of breaking the law? So in order to go to prison, the law would have to apply, right? In other words, who gives a rat's ass what the fucking law says until you can first prove it applies? And if you're just saying, "Well, we've put lots of people in prison," well, that's not facts that the law applies. That's just an appeal to tradition. You just traditionally catch people with pot, put them in court, make them prove that they had the pot on them and they were in a geographical location, and then send them to prison. That's just an appeal to tradition. That's not a fact that the law applies. Just because you put people in prison for pot doesn't mean, or that's not a fact that proves the law applies. That's the result of someone breaking the law that is clearly never questioned if the law actually applies to them, which means everybody, including the victim, just assume the law applies. So you can imagine when a cop's on the stand and you just ask him that one simple question: "You popped me for cannabis possession, for possession of cannabis. Yes or no?" The cop's going to say yes. "Do you have first-hand knowledge of any facts that can be placed into evidence that would prove that the law you arrested me under actually applies to me in the first place?" What's he going to say? What's he going to do? Pull facts out of his ass? Pull a consent form out of his ass? Come on. Their whole case falls apart there. And case gets dismissed for lack of evidence. Now, the big question is, has this worked? Absolutely it's worked. Over and over and over and over and over again, and still continues to work today. However, it's an extremely small minority of Americans. It's Americans that are wide awake, a lot of anarchists, a few libertarians, and more libertarians are starting to open their eyes and go, "Whoa, I never thought about that." And so you're starting to see some more libertarians doing this. If you go to markstevens.net and hit on success stories, he's always adding new success stories, and he doesn't post anything without proof. So the clients that he helps, he's a consultant that he helps get, felony drug possession charges dismissed for lack of evidence, speeding tickets, DUIs, just all kinds of victimless crimes, jaywalking tickets, all of these things thrown out for lack of evidence. And the lack of evidence is the fact that the prosecutor failed to provide facts proving that the law actually applies. And so it's a very real thing. You got to remember in this case here that you do own yourself, but never make that claim because you can never prove with facts that you own yourself. Just remember, never go into court making a claim. Never go in there and say, "Your law doesn't apply to me," because the second you make a claim, the judge immediately spins it around and puts the onus on you to prove your claim. Don't make claims. Government's already making the claim. They've got you in court. because they claim the law they're prosecuting you under actually applies to you. Make them prove it with facts. And when they fail to prove it with facts, well, case dismissed for lack of evidence. So anyways, guys, if you have any questions on this anarchist tactic and you want to learn more about true anarchy, freedom and liberty and the cannabis revolution, subscribe to my channel, man. We're going to pop up some more cannabis videos here. We're really going to start hammering up interviews. We're going to have smoke out sessions. We're going to talk a lot more about cannabis laws. And of course, in general, other laws as well. People are affected by these laws, and it ruins a lot of people's lives unnecessarily. And we can point out the gun in the room. Where's the criminality? Well, the criminality comes from the point that the state is attacking you without any legitimacy. You know, when public education came along, Americans were taught that we're a land of laws, we have to obey the laws, and if you don't like the laws, you can participate in the system and work to change the laws. Well, a lot of good that's done. We have victimless crime laws coming out the wazoo, jaywalking, cannabis growing, cannabis selling, not wearing your seatbelt, all kinds of crazy laws. So this whole idea that you just participate in the system is bullshit. Okay, before public education, if a politician wrote a law on a piece of paper and then turned around and said, you're now obligated to obey this, Americans would have said, oh, really? Prove it. Prove I'm obligated to obey that. And of course, they can't. They cannot prove that you're obligated to obey it. They can't prove it with facts. And so that's where that's where the emperor wears no clothes. They get naked real quick, and you start to realize these are just human beings, and all men are created equal, and they may get mad, they may get angry, they may threaten you with contempt, but the reality is, the end-all and be-all is, they're acting in a criminal manner against a peaceful human being. And when you start to see them squirm, get angry, and threaten you, you start to realize that there it is. These people are not lawyers. They're not judges. They're not police officers. They're fucking criminals. These are straight up criminals. Anyways, guys, till next time, peace.